Hi everyone. In this lesson, we are going to sketch out our ideas for a stand-up figure using basic shapes. So, using some circles and squares, I'm going to design a stick figure-like guy. He is going to have a square body and arms. And I'll put one of his arms up, so he's waving. And let's give him some legs and some feet. We'll put one of his feet out to the side too. So he's in a nice pose instead of just standing straight up. And we'll put some holes in his face. That way, he's got some eyes. All right. So, if we're going to make this in Tinkercad, how are we going to do it? You can already see that I've made him out of cylinders and boxes, but if we want him to be able to stand up, he's going to need some surface area on the bottom of his feet. So, from the side, we would see that his body and his leg sticking out here, and his leg sticking down. We need to have boxes sticking out in front. See if that makes some sense here. This way, his feet give him enough area to make him stand up. We're going to want to design this so that it's easy to print, rather than having to support up his whole arm sticking up in the air like that. We're going to print him lying down on his back. We are going to design our little stand-up stick figure guy, and we are going to design him lying down flat so that it's going to be much easier to make. You'll see that when you move things around, they move on the floor on the work plane, and in order to make them up here, like where his face is, we would have to use our little up arrow here and move them up and down. That is going to be very difficult. So let's move our example off to the side. Let's look down at the work plane, and let's design our little guy. So I am going to grab a cylinder, and just because I like it to be smoother, I'm going to turn up the number of sides all the way up. And we want this guy to be a little bit thin, so I'm going to make this 5 millimeters because it's a good size for a flat shape that's still sturdy enough that it doesn't bend. All right, now I can look at this from the top, and we'll need a box for his body. We want it to overlap with his head a little bit, but we also want it to be the same thickness. So we're going to make it 5 exactly, so that he's going to have a flat surface on his front. And I'll move it over. You can move it 1 millimeter at a time with my arrow keys, just to line it up where I want it. Now he's got some shoulders, and I'm going to want his arms and legs to be exactly the same height as this box. So instead of doing that work again, I'm just going to make a copy of this one. I can use the copy and paste button to paste another one next to it. And then we can take this shape and decide that the arm is going to be a lot thinner. So we'll shrink that arm down. 6 seems good. And now I want his arm to be pointed downwards. So we're going to use the rotate tool. Just like our shape changing handles where we can grab them and drag them around. Back to the 6 there. This little curved arrow is going to let us rotate. I click on an empty space so I can see this better. There we go. Now if we keep our mouse outside the circle, we can rotate to any angle that we want. If we keep it inside the circle, we'll snap to these angles. So I can say I want his arms out exactly 45 degrees, and that seems good. Now I'm going to move it so that it lines up with his shoulder. And that looks nice. So now I want another arm, 45 degrees on the other side. So I am going to copy this one and paste it. So with my second arm, I liked my design where he's pointing his arm up in the air. Maybe he's doing a dance move. So I'm just going to stick it on the other way. Now if you wanted both of his arms down, you could rotate this, but you could also go up here to the mirror tool and just click on one of these arrows to flip it in the other direction. That way you could have an opposite shaped arm on the other side so that he's got both of his arms pointing down. I'm going to undo that because I like his arm pointing up. Next we need some legs. So let's go ahead and make a copy of the body again. Since I already rotated these arms, I don't want to worry about rotating them back. Instead, I'll just copy and paste the body, and we'll move it down underneath and shrink it so it lines up. There we go. Now we've got one leg. I will copy it and paste it again. And we can move over and have a second leg. I like sticking one of his legs out a little bit to give him even more of a pose. So I am going to rotate, but this time instead of going exactly 45 degrees like the arm, I'll just rotate it out a little tiny bit. So I'll rotate it to wherever I like it. And let's move it to the side so it's sticking off the side of his body there. Great. Now we can see that if we stood him up, he has a very small area on the bottom of his feet. Because we've made him 5 millimeters, this is half a centimeter, so he would be really easy to tip over. So let's put some feet on him. And since I just copied this, I'm going to paste another copy of my leg in here. And with this box selected, I'm just going to shorten this down. So we'll have another 5 millimeter wide foot. And when I look at it from the side, I can use my top handle here to stretch this out. And there we go. We'll make it a 12 millimeter foot sticking off of this guy. Now we can just line it up with his leg here. And since we're snapping to 1 millimeter at a time, it's easy to use the arrow keys to make sure that all of the corners line up and we have a perfectly flat surface at the bottom. Now, let's copy and paste another one of these feet, and we'll use the arrow keys to move it straight over to the side. There we go. This way, I know that the feet are lined up at exactly the same height, and that means that he will not tip over when I stand him up. Now, if you accidentally move the feet to a different place, you can hold down Shift, select the other foot, and then we can click on the Align tool. The Align tool will change our handles into these circles, and we can see that if I click on this side, I can line the 2 feet up in the middle with the bottom edge or with the top edge. So I'll just line them up with the top edge so my lower foot moves up to where my upper foot is. And now both of them are perfectly lined up, so they'll be flat on the ground again. Let's click on this foot and just nudge it over so it matches better with the leg. Great. Now, if we want, we can add details like a face to him with some holes. So I'm going to quickly just grab a hole, and anything can be a hole. If I had a solid cylinder, I could click on hole, change it into a hole. Let's make it smooth, and let's shrink this down so that we have a shape that can be an eye. Copy and paste, and we'll move our second eye over to the side, and paste one more, and with our third shape, Let's zoom in a little bit. Maybe make his mouth bigger than his eyes this time. Perhaps he is singing. And now that we have our holes, which you can see are transparent, and right where they intersect, they will shade the area on the smooth surface. So we're going to select everything and click on Group. Once we group things together, all of the solid shapes are going to be added together and all of the holes are going to be cut out. Now we have our little guy with his face, and if we want, use that rotate tool to stand him up, and D to drop him on the floor. Looking good. We are going to set our little stand-up figure up to print. And as I mentioned in the idea video, we don't want to print him standing up, where we'll need to support his arms, and it'll be very tall, take a long time, and some extra material. So let's select him and make sure that he's lying down on the biggest flat surface he has on his back. So I'm going to use the rotate tool and keep my mouse inside the circle to put it at 90 degrees. Now I can hit D to drop it on the floor. So you can see he's floating in the air there. And he's looking good. He's completely flat on the ground. So now that I have this guy selected, I am going to click on Export. We're going to export only the select shape. We don't want our other example in there. So let's click STL, which is the most common 3D printing file. And now I've got my STL file downloaded. I'm going to go over to my slicer. So Cura is set up for the Creality CR10 and generic PLA. PLA is one of the easiest plastics to use, and that's why we use it all the time. So let's click on the folder here and open up our STL file that we just downloaded. And we should see it pop into the middle of our building area. So this grid is just like in Tinkercad, but it represents the actual floor of our printer. And if we look at this from the bottom, we can see the back side of him is blue, which is great. That means all of these surfaces are touching the floor, which is going to make him very easy to print. And since he's a nice solid shape without any curves or domes on him, and he's going to print straight up, including his feet, we can turn the quality setting down lower. So if we go to low quality, what the quality setting really means is the height of the layers. And so it's going to move up higher each time that it finishes a layer. That means we're going to be able to print him faster with less layers. And the sides of him might seem a little bit textured, but because we don't have nice smooth curves to worry about, everything is going to look perfectly good, even at lower quality. Now let's double check our other settings. We don't really need support on, but since there's nothing marked in red, it won't generate any support anyways. So we'll click on Slice. We can see this guy's going to take half an hour, and click on Preview just to double check that we are only printing what we want to print. I don't see any unneeded supports. And we can scroll down on our layers here, and we can see he's going to be printed with our wavy infill here. On the inside, he's not going to be solid. He's going to be filled in with these wavy lines. Looking good. Now we just have to save to file, and we have our G-code instructions for the printer. We're ready to upload and print.